In terms of the aftermath of the Arab Spring, I think I wanted to make two quick observations. One is that it's a misnomer that the international community was strictly or primarily interested in the three elements that Peter mentions: the support for Abdurrahman Mansour Hadi, the effort to sort out conflict among the political elites, and the counterterrorism issue. The fact of the matter is that the international community was aware of all of the elements that Peter is making, and that when we were working on these issues, we were trying to work across the board. There was extensive outreach to outsiders, including Southerners, including Southern secessionists, including the Houthis. I personally wasn't involved in that, but many others, including the UN, the EU in particular, the Germans heavily, were traveling almost on a weekly basis to Sada to meet with Abdul Malik al-Houthi. We had a number of meetings with various Southern secessionist groups, and as Peter says quite rightly, part of the problem is that the Southern secessionists were never able to really come together in any comprehensive or coherent way and express a Southern view about what it was that they wanted. One of my strong memories was actually meeting with a group of Southerners at lunch. Jeff Feltman was our assistant secretary at the time, and he had come for a visit. And we had a lunch with about a dozen Southerners, and the conversation was dominated by a few people from Aden and from Abyan, and we had Hadramatis there, we had a few people from Mahra there. And at the end of this long lunch and this long conversation about the demands of the South, the Hadramati representative, basically raised his hand and said, well, why are you talking about Southern secession? If there's going to be a division in the country, we don't want to be with you. We don't want to be with Aden or Abyan or Lahaj. We want our own country. We want a country of Hadramaut and Mahra and Socotra. And then the Mahri said, well, we don't want to be with Hadramaut either. We want to be on our own. And so, trying to reconcile all of these issues is a real challenge. So at the end of the day, what does this mean? And the key, I think, for most of us in this room is how do we take all of these facts, all of these acute observations that Peter has made, and translate it into something that's practical? How do we make this a roadmap, if you will, to trying to resolve this issue? And again, Peter has a few points in here about his recommendations. One is that we need an inclusive process, and I think that he's absolutely right about that. That at the end of the day, an agreement that only consists of a relationship between Abdurrahman Mansour Hadi and his government and the Houthis is not something that's going to be sustainable over the future. The issue is at what point and how do you bring these other voices in? And what I would say is that if you try to do it now, if you try to do it as a separate track in a political process, it won't work. It took 2 years of hard effort to try to organize a national dialogue conference, which brought in many of these same elements that we're talking about today. It took 2 years of hard work to try to get that thing together and to get it to produce a result. I don't believe, and that was at a time that was good in Yemen. It was a time when there wasn't a civil war. Now, at the end of 3 years of fighting, to try to replicate that approach, I think, is not going to succeed. So at that point, I would say you need it, but not now. Peter says no national champion. I think he's absolutely right about that. Bringing in the issue of the external actors, again, I think that Peter is quite correct about this. The problem is how, and some of the external actors are not being particularly transparent about what it is that they're trying to achieve. The Saudis, I think, more or less are. We know what the Saudis want out of this. But the Iranians, the other key player in this scenario, have been completely opaque. And I can say that I've had opportunities to ask the Iranians about what their position is and to push them on the idea that they should be helpful in trying to resolve this issue. That is a way of reducing tensions in the region and recognizing that, in fact, Iran, at the end of the day, doesn't have a strong interest in Yemen, only sees it as a way of provoking the Saudis. But the problem is that the Iranians themselves, I think, are divided. And you can talk about, what President Rouhani would like, you can talk about what Zarif would like, but they're not the guys who are calling the shots. And unless you're talking to Jaffrey or unless you're talking to Soleimani, you're not really talking to the guys in Tehran who are running this war. And those guys are not going to tell you what it is that they want. So there's a problem with getting to the external actors.